Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Crossroads of Cognizance, the place where we are creating community discussion around spiritual topics, around witchy topics, metaphysical topics, and giving our insight as professional energy healers, professional witches, as professional, literally professional spiritual people. We've made our living off of these things, and we've hit bumps, we've had bruises, and our hope is that in sharing this with you all, we're expanding with each other, the learned lessons, the normalizations, things like that. And that's what we're creating here on the show. If this is your first time being with us, some housekeeping things. We'd love to see your comments. If you're on Facebook, you're going to have to click the video so we see you. And then if you're on YouTube, just do what you do, just like Debs did. Hi, Debs. And we will continue on. Oh, look, we have tons of people. Look at Bram. Hi, Bram. So as this conversation continues, we want to hear from you. We want to hear your insights. So with that in mind, the topics today, too, we've kind of covered, kind of not. Could always cover more on. One is free will. We've had the free will versus destiny discussion, but we are taking some comments from, or not comments, but stories from Reddit where people are asking these questions and sharing their experiences. And so there was a discussion on free will. And then the other is about a very common phrase I'm sure you've heard if you just started your journey or if you are well deep in the trenches. What you see in others exists in you. So, with that being the case, that's what we'll be discussing today. But before we actually get into the conversation piece, you probably need to know who we are if this is your first time watching. So I am Dahlia Rose. I am the founder of the Conduit School, and I work with many individuals, clients, students, to help further their connection to their purpose, to teach them about crystals, meditation, spiritual tools, and empowering them to believe in themselves, believe in their ability to overcome their circumstances, and to help them make those choices. I also perform readings and cleansings of people, of businesses, of spaces, and if you can get me on the topic of astrology, I will talk to you for at least 5 hours. And that's who I am.
Noted. It sounds like an alcohol-fueled 5 hours on social media.
No alcohol
I'm
needed. It is its
Katrina
own drug.
Rasmussen on behalf of Crossroads Occult, and my husband and I make and offer handmade magical products for spell work and purification, all sorts of things like that, healing. I also do cleansings for people, readings for people, and spell work for people. And this is fun. I just transitioned from email readings to video readings. And so now the readings that I offer, they're pre-recorded videos. They're not interactive, but it now comes to you in video form. So that's been a lot of fun. I've appreciated that very much. So that's what I do, and that's what I do 7 days a week. And I'm really excited to be here with these topics. So yeah, I even the topics that we revisit, we've been doing this for so long that we revisit them from a higher perspective than where we were when we first talked about it. And we've learned more things. And I've written around 40 something books. I really don't know how many. I could go back and figure it out. I just haven't. And I look back on some of the books I wrote as an expert in that field. And I go back and look at them now and realize, well, that's not true for me anymore. And that is not what I believe anymore. And this is different and that's different. An example is I wrote a really popular book called Magical Ethics and Protection that was about the ethics of spell work, the ethics of, how to not be an asshole in ritual and things like that, how to be magically ethical when you're doing spell work. And I wrote that in 2013. And so I look at that now, and I have a class that I teach on magical ethics that's been updated through the years. They could be totally different people writing these two things. And I only bring that up to say that even if we have talked about something before, we may have a different take on it. And one thing I love about Dahlia is, and I kind of see, we mirror this in ourselves. I do the same thing, that we're not afraid to be proven wrong. I mean, we're
Oh no.
excited to integrate new information into our practice and our belief systems, and to we'll be the first ones to say, man, I believe this before, and that has since proven to be utter bullshittery. So here's the update. So when we come back and revisit new topics, I'm excited because we're both going to have had new experiences that fuel that conversation.
100%, 100%. I even if the time period hasn't been that long, it's
Yeah.
about it's about evolving and learning. And I feel like, I don't know if you feel this true, Katrina, that uh, the timelines, the speed of time is picked up, so the ability to learn faster is just there. And I
Mm.
like to approach topics with this sense of, I learned this from Jim Quick, who's about learning. He's very much big on quick learning and everything like that. To approach a topic from a place of not knowing, just even if you've experienced it every day of your life, come to it just with a curiosity over a sense of ownership of the information, and you will invariably learn and expand through it. So that, I love that about you too, and how you are willing to say like, hey, I've mastered a lot, and here's also what I learned last week. So
And I don't know what I don't know yet.
yeah.
So another thing that I love where you mentioned about time speeding up is, as you age and you get closer to your own mortality, you start, at least I did, and I've noticed this in Eric as well, you start to have more of an urgency to learn certain things. And so
Yeah.
I think that that in itself draws in stronger participation in your own education, whereas before you run into things like, oh gosh, look what Wicca is, and look what raindrop healing is, and you find all of these different things and you get excited about it, but there's a part of your mind that says, I've got my whole life to experience this and learn about it.
Yeah.
Whereas as you get closer to um, almost dead, you start to think about things like, I really wanted to learn this and I never did. So I need to really get on the ball here. So it's almost like your brain starts to open up more to learning the older that you get, because you're running out of time to learn those things in this life.
Absolutely, couldn't have been better said. So with that in mind, as far as you know, our opening up, covering these topics again. Our first is coming to us, like I said, from Reddit, and the title was "I don't think we have free will." And when I saw that title, I was like, "Oh, juicy."
Spoilers.
Uh, so here is the individual's story and thought process. Once, 4 years ago, late at night, I was walking down the street when I saw a half open fruit shop. I could either reach through the fence to grab a banana or ignore it and keep walking. I stopped and imagined both scenarios. I realized that it didn't matter what I chose because I was forced to make one of those two decisions. Either I chose to take it or go home, and I could only experience one reality out of those two. Since then, I doubt whether we are really free of what we decide. If we are consciousness occupying a character and the character does not exist, who is the one who decides? The answer I get when I think about this question is that there's no one to decide, but we are always forced to choose. So are we really free? So Yes. I this makes me think of what I do with my kids. So with Anthony in the beginning, it was a lot of do this, do that. And then I got to a place where I was like, okay, I don't want to fight this very stubborn Pisces. So I'm going to give him at least five options. That was usually where the comfort area. Like if I gave him two, it was like, I don't really want to choose. But if I gave him more options, which were just variations on the first one, he was in a place of comfort and he could decide for himself. Um, of course, I'm exercising my will on him to say I'm only comfortable with these five options, but he had the freedom to decide. And what that created was is a teenager who has thoughts and opinions that are based on more than present moment emotions. Usually, we all have bad days, so he will put more thought into it. Like I was asking him the other day, he was talking about a girl that he likes. And I said, well, what do you like about her? And he was like, I like the way that she thinks. I pay attention to how she speaks and how she, carries herself with confidence. And I was not expecting that. But that comes from somebody who has had the freedom to make decisions rather than conforming to someone else's perspective, will, and judgment. And so when I look at this and I see somebody being like, oh, well, we're still forced to make a decision. One, there was no force. He could have sat there all night and not made a decision. And that's a decision, So he wasn't, I say he, I shouldn't be gendering this person. This person had free will to make a multitude of decisions that didn't involve the fruit stand or did. And that said, the force, I believe, comes from within us. We as human beings feel compelled so much to be humans doing that. That's where the force comes from. Everything around us is just there. And we feel a need to act on it. And so I believe we do have free will. Of course, sometimes our choices are plentiful and sometimes they are very narrow. But and every time those choices will have consequences. Every single time, even though people don't like that word, whether it's a good consequence or a bad consequence, it is a consequence, it's a result. So I don't know if I'm making this a short Reddit exploration, but yes, we have free will. What are your thoughts?
You're wrong is the answer. So I hope I can read my own writing because I just went into almost automatic writing. As soon as I read those Reddit things, I was just furiously writing notes about those specific, the two that you came up with, which are just brilliant. One thing, the first thing I wrote was, if you are basing a significant life view on whether or not you stole a banana on your way home, you have got problems way bigger than whether or not we have free will. I mean, come on. The other thing I would say is you made a choice. And see, and here's what's interesting. And they never say if they stole the banana or not. Okay, they may or may not have. We don't know. And this could get into our mirroring conversation. But the question is, when they made that decision, whatever it was that they have to live with, did they make that choice out of free will, or did they make that choice because fate somehow ordained that they would make that choice? And so our presumption is that at every of the one of the bazillion crossroads we come to every day, where we make some choice, get out of bed, don't get out of bed, shave, don't shave, eat breakfast, don't eat breakfast. Every day we're at crossroads of all kinds, including those of cognizance. But why do we make those choices? And are we actually making choices because it was preordained we made those choices? We don't know. I would say that to me, life is a choose your own adventure book. And one of the things this person said is that you can only choose one experience. And my question is, did you really only choose one of those paths? Because in another dimension, in another life, in a parallel situation, maybe you chose that other path. Maybe you've made one choice or 3 or 10 at the same moment in 1,000 different places. We don't know if you only chose one. We know that in this choose your own adventure book, you made one choice and that led you to a specific chapter, which the next part is you know, you really are free to decide, but you're never free of or from that choice that you made.
Right.
No matter what you decide, if you decide, I'm going to stay in bed and call into work today, you made a choice and it's going to have an impact. You might have met your soulmate at work that day, but you were feeling a little bit tired, a little bit lazy, so you decided to stay home. So guess what? You didn't meet your soulmate that day.
Well,
Or maybe you were going to do something so brilliant that day at work that you would get a raise. Your boss would be impressed. But instead, your boss saw that you called in yet again, and that tipped the scale. So we always have consequences for our choices. And that's kind of the beauty of free will. We're free to decide, but we're never free from the consequences of what we decide. Another thing that was brought up is something to the effect, and I don't have the exact wording, but there was a conversation about the difference in consciousness and character, and which one is making the choice. Is it your consciousness or your character? And
if we are consciousness occupying a character and the character does not exist, who is the one who decides?
okay, so here's the trouble I had with that. There's an assumption in this conversation on Reddit or in this statement that consciousness and character are two different things. And I don't think that's ever the case. I think it's so interwoven that your character becomes your consciousness. And I don't care if this person is referring to a cartoon character, as in you're a caricature of yourself, or this person is talking about your integrity, your character, your sense of character. Either way, it becomes part of the composite that makes a decision. And so that they're both deciding together. There are so many factors coming into play anytime we make even the least significant decision that you just can't separate those two. And when they said something about, did you make that choice, or I said, did you make that choice because fate ordained it? Is it part of your character? Is it part of your consciousness? The discussions I'm talking about that we're making choices are little things. Like, did we get up in the morning? Did we shave? Did we eat fruit? Or did we eat pre-sweetened cereal for breakfast? Whatever it might be, all those little choices. Think about the big choices. And is that fate or is it a choice? I watch a lot of true crime stuff. I can watch true crime, I can watch catfishing videos, and I can say, I would not make those choices. It isn't in me. Now, we can always split hairs and say, yeah, but if you were in this situation or you were in that situation, sure. But in the place where I am now, I would not make the choice to just brutally murder a stranger. That wouldn't happen. Okay? That's not fate. It's not even necessarily free will. I mean, I could make that choice, but I'm not going to. So I think there are some things that are just integral, that are born into us, that prevent us from making certain choices. So you have to also get with, okay, who holds the reins on that? Where does that sort of preordained control come from? And we see that with our clients all the time. We have people that are in horrible relationships, abusive relationships. They are not going to leave. And we have to work the healing around the fact that no matter what we say, they are not going to leave that relationship. And we would like to be able to give them the room to grow and to see, I can't stay here. This is too abusive, blah, blah, blah. We know in some part of our head that just ain't going to happen. So that's kind of my point on that. I keep thinking about what Penn said about the way that religion is considered to be something that creates our character and creates our consciousness. Penn is actually an atheist. Penn is a magician, for those of you who don't know, and also a podcaster. But somebody asked Penn as an atheist who doesn't believe in a higher power, what's to keep you from raping and murdering, as much as you want to? And he said, I absolutely rape and murder as much as I want to, which is not at all, because I'm not an asshole.
Right.
And so, there is a sense of integrity that will sometimes keep us from making choices we could technically make. So my whole point in saying all that crap, and I've gone through, I think, most of my points, is that there are so many factors coming into play when we make big decisions or small decisions that it's going to be almost impossible to sort out the threads of where this free will comes from. And therefore, it's going to be hard to separate out how much of that free will is actually fate in disguise, pretending to be free will. And, I think it's kind of disempowering when that person says there is no one to decide and we're forced to choose. There is somebody to decide. There's only one person to decide, and that's you. And are we really free? Yeah, we are always free. And that's the beauty of it. But we are going to have all of these factors coming into play that are going to influence how we choose. And that's part of the fate part rather than the free will part.
Throws down the mic. You know, as you were talking, to what came to me, one of the things that I really felt was this exploration of free will versus decision making only feels important on the topic of where are my decisions coming from emotionally. Outside of that, questioning whether we have free will or not feels like this person needs to go out and make more choices in order to have that experience. This it almost reads like a person who is on the tip of not trusting themselves.
They were going to steal a banana, or may have.
Yeah, right. Like, I could be a thief if not for the law. It, to me, it seems like the discussion of free will isn't important unless there's a you're not exercising your free will component to it.
It kind of feels like they want to break bad, and they're
Yeah.
trying to figure out whether the devil on their shoulder is coming from within or without. Is it just fate that I steal this banana? Was I meant to steal this banana to teach that vendor to be more careful? Or was I meant to steal this banana to prove I could get away from it with something? When it's just, just take the banana or don't, but you're going to have to deal with the outcome.
Okay. Well,
it's a lot of pressure on a banana, man.
Right. The banana's just sitting there. Banana has no free will.
Banana doesn't do shit, man. It's just a banana.
The store doesn't have free will. It's just that man.
So many of these Reddit people, that are posting these things, I understand how thoughtful they're being about these things. They're really putting a lot of power and energy into the things that they're posting. And a lot of the commenters are putting a lot of power and energy into their responses. But I just got to be thinking like, dude, settle down. It's just a banana. What motivation? What is your motivation in wondering this is what we've got to think about.
Yeah. One thing I do have a question about. So we know that there are people that exist that are compulsive, like they just have a compulsion to do something. In thinking about this concept of free will, I think if you have the ability to ask if you have free will, like if you can say, I could make a choice right now. Do I have free will? You probably have it, right? Like that's a great identifier. If you have the freedom to ask the question, you have free will. Do you think that compulsive individuals have free will?
Yes and no. I was thinking as you're talking about people who have a certain psychopathy, such as borderline personality disorder or sociopathy, or things that prevent them from conforming to societal norms. And so that's what came into my head when we were talking about compulsions. Now, we also have obsessive compulsive disorder, which is I will not teach a class myself if the tablecloths are not symmetrical. Uh, and I have a choice to walk in there and teach that class. And my poor students and my poor apprentices just, oh shit, we better get this tablecloth even, or Katrina's going to flip out. I don't flip out. I just stop the class and insist that they all be level. That's the way that my type of OCD manifests. And so that's compulsive. But could I? Yes. I would be uncomfortable, but I could. So I think there is an edge of free will there, depending on the degree of pathology involved. I think there are some people who, for whatever reason, whether it's miswiring or it's ego or it's willfulness or whatever, cannot control their behavior. And I think that then is a different conversation about what free will looks like. I am almost inclined to say that free will is subjective to each person.
Oh yeah.
And yeah. So that's where I would kind of take that. So yeah, I think that
Subjective
compulsive people do and don't. They can, yes, they can have free will and exert that free will or not, but one might make them uncomfortable. One choice might make them uncomfortable, where the other one would not.
Excellent. We have some great comments here. I want to tackle Bram's. This is all UPG. We know what that stands for.
Unproven gnosis. Unproven gnosis. It's when you know something, but we don't have the scientific basis to argue it. I hope that's what you mean, Bram.
Well, that's fantastic and something I will use.
You and I are 100% UPG. Okay.
Okay.
That's all we are. Bullshit.
This is all UPG, but I have had really profound moments of clairsentience where I felt a moment or a decision was profound. I don't interpret those as destiny, but cosmic, and opportunity, one of multiples. And the clarification, unverified personal gnosis. Yeah. So the difference between feeling something's profound versus like, did my free will, I think there's room for both. Like if something is profound, your free will can still be part of that, alongside maybe the encouragement of source, your guides, whatever is going on there for you. So I don't usually use, it's interesting to consider profundity as a measurement for, your free will being involved in that. It's actually something I'd love to sit with. And because those profound experiences, I feel like I have them at least a couple times a week. And that's probably just because I'm Pollyanna, like, what? The trees are talking to me and I enjoy that stuff. So now I'm going to be like, okay, how much of my free will is involved here? And I think where I'm going with this is it's the free will to choose to experience it versus keep your head down and just keep moving. Like today, I made a post about coming across a fox with my 6-year-old. Now I saw it down the road. We were late for school, and I could have made school the priority, but instead I wanted that moment to be special for us. So I chose with my free will to participate with this really cool animal and have a cool moment with somebody that I love deeply. And so I feel like, and it was profound because he was like, my spirit animal. And I was like, yeah. And then the messages that you look up about the fox and what it could mean. And it was all very powerful and profound. But I had to choose in that moment to
Another
interact.
thing to bring up in regard to that real quickly. Doctor Who, speaking of important things, the idea throughout their thought thesis over the many centuries that show has existed, of the idea of immutable points. And this idea is that, yes, we have free will, but there are certain immutable points that will happen in our life that we have to check off our list. And we can get there. I mean, we can make free will choices to get there certain ways, but we are going to arrive there. And an example I have for that, honestly, is it's kind of probably revealing a little bit too much. But when I met my first husband, I was not ready for a relationship. I was coming out of a bad divorce. I wasn't even finished with that divorce yet. I was 35 and he was 20. And so it was not what I was looking for. I tend toward older men. And the second I met him face to face, I knew we were going to be married. And I was just like, oh gosh, what? And we remained, we were close. We were friends, for a long time after that. And when I let him know, that, well, this seems to be where this is going, he was like, oh, hell no, 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 this isn't, no. Because he's 20 years old. He's not looking to marry a 35-year-old woman with 4 kids. That's not the direction his life was heading, and it's not what he wanted. And I just became more and more convinced as I looked into this spiritually. This is what's going to happen.
This was your UPG.
And he was just like, no, gosh, I love you. You're amazing. You're my best friend, but this is not going to happen. And you need to get okay with that for us to stay friends. And I was like, keep on telling yourself that, bud. And so this sounds like this went on for ages, but it was really just like a year. And when he went to not Afghanistan, the other place, Saudi Arabia, with Desert Storm, he called me from there. I was like, let's get married. I was like, no shit, dude.
Surprise.
And so he had free will choice all the way down the line at any point. The fact was that we, went through a lot of struggles because of the differences in our ages and the differences in what we wanted in life and this sort of thing. But the idea was that we were meant to get married because there were all these different things we were going to do together. So I think there are certain things that we're meant to do with our life, and we have free will about how we get to that space. Whether we're going to be dragged kicking and screaming toward it or we run to it with open arms, it's going to happen. It's just how beaten up are you going to be when you get there?
Right. Bruised, dusted, which brings us to, I think this is a great segue onto this comment from Tiara. Thank you for sharing it, Tiara. This topic makes me think about if we can miss our blessings or not based on the choices from our free will. I am a firm believer. I mean, I guess I pulled this from church, and then it's pronounced itself even more being outside of religion, is that what's yours is yours. So I don't think that we're able to miss our blessings. Can you delay things based on your choices? 100%. I'm trying to think of my astrologer loves to like point out points of the year when I'm going to have a kid, and I'm like, no, and so during those times I will kick something down the road, and maybe it's not a real baby, maybe and Dolly's not pregnant, so we're still kicking it down the road, but maybe it's the birth of something as profound and life-changing as a child. So I don't believe, like you were talking about, those sort of markers in our life, I don't believe that we're able to miss blessings. I think that's a not fully formed statement, because define miss, it's like Katrina said, you don't go to work, so you don't meet your soulmate. If they're really part of your soul's journey, wait, it will happen again. We live in a reality of cycles and ebbs and flows and things of that nature. So I just, in terms of this conversation, it feels more important to exercise your free will, because maybe the blessing is in the learning process. Maybe it's in the bumps and bruises, the journey, right? Not the destination. Which we sometimes equate the destination to the blessing itself. And it's all of the things. So that's my 2 cents on that. Did you have thoughts?
Yeah, I think that we miss some of our blessings, but I think that they may be replaced with different blessings. For instance, on the soulmate thing, I think in life we have many soulmates,
Yes.
and some of them we might not meet this time. Some of them we might, and so I think that if we didn't go to work that day, we didn't meet our soulmate, it could be in some ways a tragedy that person didn't come into our lives. But as you said, if they're meant to be there, they're going to cycle around. We'll meet them at the grocery store. We'll meet them at a support group or something like that. There'll be some place that they'll come into um,
Oh,
with us. But at
yeah.
the same time, maybe not. We might not have the blessing of meeting that specific person this life. That might have been the only time we were going to meet them. And instead, we meet another soulmate that is in our pack that's supposed to be there for us, and we come across them and we don't ever even know that we missed that. I think
Right.
there are lots of opportunities and blessings we miss that we don't ever even realize that we bypassed. Just like I think there are a lot of tragedies that we don't realize that we bypassed.
Hmm.
So I do think there's some things that are lost, but I don't think it's necessarily, when it comes to the end of the road, something that completely just wrecked things. I think that it just is.
And I think belief systems play a huge role in all of this as well. Like if you believe it's possible to miss your blessing because of your choices or your free will, then that's what will happen. This world is going to, this universe is going to respond to that. If you're part of structures and practices and belief systems that believe that way, you're going to have that happen. Just like my belief system is that when I go outside, I'm going to get talked to by nature. And if it doesn't happen, um, well, tantrums happen usually. What's
Wow.
going on?
That escalated quickly.
Throw something in the woods to make the birds scatter. Okay, now I got my sign. Totally joking. But we have another topic here to cover. So this other one starts out with the title, What You Think of Others is a Reflection of Yourself. Um, what you see in others exists in you. So, do you think this statement is true? Is true, at least in my life. I used to be pretty miserable and unkind due to trauma, still working on it and doing self development though, and would regularly spot negative traits in others, not knowing that I too had those traits. I would judge others for being judgmental or unkind, but I too was judging them. I was being hypocritical. After I did some self development work and worked on my own kindness, compassion, forgiveness, being non judgmental, etc., I now regularly see others as kind, compassionate, loving. I'm more inclined to see the good traits in others and barely think about their faults like I did before. I recognize that everyone is fighting a hard battle and people mostly act out of their own pain, not maliciousness. What do you think about this statement? Do you think there's some truth to it? Caveat, I'm still working on being kind. It's an ongoing project, but I like to think I'm better than I was before. Um, did I see you throw up your hands? Go ahead, Katrina.
Okay. First of all, there's no escaping the human experience for anybody. I don't care how gracious you are, how enlightened you are, how actualized you are. We are observers of human behavior. In the observing of human behavior, we make certain discerning judgments. That is a reality. It's not something necessarily to pass judgment against. It's the way that humans are. We are discerning in order to protect the energies around us. We are discerning to say, this person behaves negatively toward other people, therefore, I don't want them in my world or in my my bubble, in my environment, because they have behaved negatively so much that I don't want to be around them. I don't think that that's us responding necessarily to something inside of us that mirrors that. I think we genuinely decide that certain behaviors are not for us, and that we are not going to associate with somebody because of that. That is perceived by some people as unkind and judgmental. But the fact is that if we did not have that sort of human discernment, we probably would not be alive as a species now. We have
Right.
to be able to evaluate threats and evaluate the intention of other people around us and make those judgments accordingly. And like I said, I watch a lot of true crime, and I can watch true crime and genuinely make assessments about the integrity of those people without it being a reflection of something inside me. I don't believe it. I don't believe when I'm watching a show on you know, a vicious murder or something, that is somehow reflective of me wanting to murder somebody. So I think that there are limits to this. Now, that being the case, we can agree probably that hurt people hurt people.
For sure.
And we're all hurt in some way. It's very rare you come across somebody who isn't still dealing with hurts or traumas that they experienced practically from the moment of birth. We all have those things that we're trying to heal and that we're getting better and better at healing. We can also say things like, who enjoys being around angry people? Angry people.
Right.
They like feeling the appreciation of being angry about the same things, and having the camaraderie and the validation of people who are also angry about this or this or this. And other people are going to judge what they're angry about and decide if that fits into their worldview and their life and what they're wanting to have around them, or it doesn't. I personally don't like to be around people that are angry all the time. It makes me very uncomfortable. And I don't think that's because of some rage inside of me that is unexpressed. I'm really good at expressing my rage. Uh, I think that it's just that I don't enjoy that energy of somebody who is just chronically angry. Um, I think that the best that we can do when we're talking about that quote and that discussion is to say, you know, you should be comparing your forward movement not on the reflection of what you're seeing around you, but on your own prior behavior and prior situation. Are you better than you were yesterday or last year or 10 years ago? Have you improved upon yourself, with the understanding that being better than you were does not mean people want to hang out with you? Just because you're better than you were, oh, I don't stab puppies in the head anymore, check me
Wow.
out, you know? Just being better than you were before isn't always going to warrant other people with different feelings and needs of wanting to be around you. I feel like when people are looking at ideas of mirroring what's around us, and I'm kinder now, so I see kindness in other people more, I have to ask, are you training your experience, or are you training your vision?
Hmm.
Are you okay? It's just like when I can't remember the name of the phenomenon, but when you buy a Volvo and suddenly you see Volvos everywhere on the road,
Oh, yeah.
are you now seeing the kindness in people because you trained yourself to see that? Because, oh, I have a Volvo now. Look, there's a Volvo. I am kind now. Oh, look, that person's being kind. So, I don't know that it's, or are you the opposite? I know that as I became more kind and compassionate, it became more apparent to me when people were not. I noticed it more because it was uncommon. It wasn't part of my mindset, and so it stood out more. Whereas if I was angry and not compassionate and frustrated, I didn't even notice other people being frustrated as much because that was what was going on in my head. It was
Right.
normal. It was normalized. So I really think we have to look at the experience this person is having and see Okay, is it just your vision that shifted, or is it the experience you're having as this new person? That's what
Sure.
I
And
want.
I feel like, so to your point, they did feel like they were getting better with time, right? I guess for me, I this statement has held true in places where I was specifically being judgmental in a negative way. So if I was like, why did this person do that? Or how could they make this decision? It usually did reflect something in me. Sometimes it was direct, sometimes it wasn't. I mean, I recall at the height of my workaholism and my just drive and desire to go and being a mom, I was just like whatever to stay at home moms. I was like, how could you want to stay home? Don't you want to get out? And really what was there was a cry within me to have the ability, the decision, to be able to stay home. And so exploring what I saw in another person and made judgments about being existing in me has felt true. Again, it's not a blanket statement. Like you said, I can observe something as wrong and be like, yeah, I'd never do that. No problems here. Been in the situation and said no, I'm okay. Um, and yet I find that question, or that statement, that consideration of mirroring, valuable when I am not at my best self. When I'm asking what's really going on here, and it's like, oh, the issue that I have with this other individual is an issue that I have with myself. Um, so I guess I tackled it from that standpoint. I want to cover what Bram was talking about here. Um, People respond to how you treat them and what you project. I feel like that's only half true. um, because I've seen and experienced scenarios where somebody put forward kindness, and a person, the response, the reaction to that kindness was anger. Like, you shouldn't, from a place of likely, um, you want something from me, and that's why you're being kind to me, or um, I just don't like overly happy people. So I feel like sometimes yes, sometimes no, Bram. Um, and then I, like, in reading your statement, I was like, well, maybe they're picking up on some lack of integrity, like the kindness isn't real. And I really tried to go deep with it, but I still feel like sometimes yes and sometimes no. I think when you are on a self-development path, focusing on yourself is the only opportunity, rather than, oh, what I'm seeing in this person is consistently what's inside of me. That, I think, can lead down a road of self-judgment, and a road where, especially for people who tend to find fault within themselves, where you're like, wow, am I really capable of that? Like, I'm on the receiving end of this, I must be receiving it because I have it. Do I have it? It sounds crazy. I've seen it, I've definitely worked with it in client spaces, and having to convince a person and to ask a person, like, okay, you were in this scenario, did you do what they said you did? Well, no. Did you want to do what they said you did? Well, no. Okay, then it's probably safe to say that's not who you are. It's who
Right.
they perceive you to be. And so,
Well, and that gets to number two of Bram's idea that perception is a filter. They
yeah,
have a filter over, and people are going to always presume other people will respond the way that they would, and then they're surprised when they don't, and that can be good or bad.
could be good or bad.
Good or
And
bad.
there's a different version of you. I had this conversation with somebody. I can't remember who it was. There's a different version of you in everyone's head. Everybody, literally. The only way to know who you are is for you to take that journey. If and there are hundreds of thousands of people out there walking around being somebody who they thought somebody else needed,
Yeah.
who are, and I lived that life, even very recently. So, when your ego finds a comfort space, it becomes something. Your personality is what I mean by your ego. And so, um, I say that to say, if there's a different version of you out there in everyone else's head, this is a great time. You can self-reflect using mirroring. But I think the most useful thing is to ask, what is this trying to show me? Not,
Mhm.
oh, I have this trait inside of me. That's my 2 cents.
I
On
think that idea of do I have it is always a valid question to ask, especially if we are having a strong feeling about someone else's behavior or perception of us. Or Elvis, no, not now. Where just asking the question is fine. But it's also fine to say, no, I don't. I don't have that. And to be confident about that. Um, Another aspect of what Bram was talking about is the idea that we teach people how to treat us based on the behaviors that we reinforce or shut down.
hmm
And that is, I think, in some ways irrelevant of mirroring. We will sometimes watch someone have a negative reaction toward us that we ask, okay, why is this coming to me? Do I have this? Is it triggering from something inside of me that that I'm not acknowledging? You come back and you say, well, no, it's not, or even yes, it is. You're still going to have a response to that person that's either going to reinforce that behavior that you didn't want to see, or it's
hmm
going to start to shut it down. Either way, there's going to be a boundary that comes up, and is that boundary going to be crossed, or is it going to be accepted, is the next question.
Right. I think that the piece in this post about choosing to be more compassionate, loving, and kind, and then choosing to see that in others, I think that's great. I feel like there's so much more opportunity when you take the entirety of a person in and just let them be themselves, wherever they are on their path, to not feel a compulsion to, I have to see the best in them because of what's driving that. I mean, I think that's where the what is in you I see in myself thing falls short. Is it almost start it can evolve into a, I'm afraid to see the worst in myself. And
Mm-hmm.
I believe in the whole picture is important, because each thing makes a difference in something, an experience. To know a whole person is to love a whole person, and to be able to see the worst in a person is to be able to see the worst in yourself. You're not going to see any more of another person than you see in yourself.
Well,
And
and that's
so,
how, I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, I just feel that's important. So just leaning into the compassion, the love, and the kindness feels short-sighted.
I think also it speaks to the idea of having authentic relationships and
Hmm.
showing up from an authentic position with everybody you're going to engage on any kind of interpersonal level. And I'm not talking about just being authentic with your dentist receptionist or whatever. I'm talking about the people that you're close with, showing up authentically rather than, I know this person has a certain expectation of me that isn't congruent with my basic nature. So I'm going to mask and show them
Mhm.
that behavior so that they feel good about being around me, is a recipe for disaster. It really creates severe complications in the ability to connect with somebody. And
Yeah.
so when we can have authentic relationships where we show up in our authentic truth and they do as well, and we're able to see the things about them that are challenging to us, we can then make a better decision about that person's place in our life, and they can about us. And while initially that might be uncomfortable, it does lead to a more authentic and positive engagement, because you are able to shift your expectations away from what you think they ought to be,
Right.
to seeing them as they are and deciding, this is somebody that I really do appreciate and want to have close with me, or this is somebody that isn't really demonstrating the behaviors I want to see in the people that I take to my heart of hearts. So, but the gift is that authenticity, so that it doesn't come back and surprise us later after we're even more invested.
Bram says another potential pitfall is not having space for other people not being like you. Even neurotypical people don't all think the same. Not everyone thinks in not everyone
Thinks in
thinks in
language.
language. Not everyone thinks in pictures. Yeah,
Mhm.
100%. It's a very limiting experience, and I like what Katrina was saying. It's there's a safety component to it. And it also made me think about this desire to see the best in everyone is a slippery slope to making excuses for bad behavior. Oh well, they probably didn't mean it. I know them to normally be compassionate and kind. What if they did mean it? And what if
Mhm.
you need to come to that
Yeah.
realization that something's changed? You may not realize it at the moment when because you're just trying to see the best. So
Yeah. There's also, in fact, toxic authenticity. And that's those people that have what society, or even let's go with most people, would consider to be objectionable behaviors, but they qualify it by saying, oh, that's just how I am. You're just, if you're going to be in my life, you're just going to have to understand that I'm going to tell you the truth at all times, which means I'm going to be brutally shitty with you,
yeah.
So there is also toxic authenticity, which is an unwillingness or an inability to show compassion in the way that you approach people. And so that
Mhm.
compassion should always be in there as a component of your relationship, but not to the point that it cripples you, which, oh, I'm compassionate toward my abuser because they had a really bad childhood, or because their ex was really mean to them. We always have to use compassion conservatively and properly in our interactions, but at the same time, don't excuse your bad behavior by saying, "Oh, that's just how I am," because that's horrible.
Yes, a lack of tact is never just how you are. Maybe a conversation, because we're at that hour, guys. But maybe a conversation for another time is I remember having a discussion with someone where I said to them, you don't know who you are without your trauma. And
Mm.
so to utter the phrase, this is just who I am, is completely inaccurate, because you don't know who you are. You've literally been traumatized from birth, being born into an abusive household. So
Mhm.
maybe next topic, but for now, I think we've said everything that we can on this. Thank you so much, you guys, for your participation. Thank you, Bram, Tiara. Thank you, Elsbeth, and Debs, and uh, being holistic with Machani. Thank you for participating. We always have a great time with you guys. You always make these conversations worth having, worthwhile, and we love showing up for you. We just as a quick reminder, these are now every other week, so we'll see you not next week but the next Thursday after that, and we'll catch you next time on Crossroads of Cognizance. Bye everyone.